All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Weber, and today we're going to talk about adaptive physical activity. We're going to talk about the history of people living with disabilities and their roles throughout history and what we're going to kind of go into in the future as far as what adaptive fitness is. So, we're going to go ahead and start with the historical context, disability recognition, and program origins. We'll talk about the Roman era, medieval era, the civil rights era, and what led to a lot of the programs that we have today. So, ancient to modern recognition of disabilities led to laws and programs like adaptive physical education, individualized education plans, and Special Olympics. So, throughout history, we've recognized disability, whether that's in Roman era, where we identified blindness, spinal injuries, and hearing losses as vague terms like weak-minded. For other conditions like prothesis used, we have an iron hand from Marcus Sergius in 218 BC. So it was recognized throughout history that there could be disability. And so, through whatever it was, in this case, amputation, the recognition that you can lose your ability was known. And when you look at medieval period, there was leprosy, mental and behavioral issues were seen as a sin. The blind were begged and legally starting in like 1250 in Paris. There were some inclusion via religious roles. So, religious institutions started taking people with disabilities, specifically mental or behavioral issues. But some may have seen it as sin back in this period from 476 to 1500 AD. When we look at the civil rights era from 1800 to present, we think of things like autism, which started as a classification in 1943, and Asperger's in 1944. So Asperger's, the higher functioning level autism. And then you have things like cerebral palsy, which was known in 1861, Down syndrome, 1866. That's when trisomy 21 was discovered, which is a chromosome addition. So people with Down syndrome have an added chromosome. Intellectual disability, which was called idiocy in 1850, or mental retardation. This was the older terms recognized in the DSM-1, which was um, in 1952. So we don't typically use that term anymore. We use the term intellectual disability. So we don't use the R word, but it was used as a classification in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And this is going to describe all disabilities. Okay. And it'll probably even give you the historical background as well. Um, Programs like American School for the Deaf occurred in 1817, Paralympics 1948, Special Olympics 1968, and IDEA 1975, ADA in 1990. So these are all terms we'll talk about in adaptive physical activity once we get into some of the main terms and categories. So, um, as far as autism spectrum disorder, what is that? It's a neurodevelopmental disorder, which is a deficit in social communication, repetitive behaviors. This was called early infantile autism and was also a form of child onset schizophrenia. It was actually called child onset schizophrenia at one point. So it went from being recognized as maybe schizophrenia-like conditions to what we call now early infantile autism, 1943, which is basically social withdrawal. Milder form, which is Asperger's, that was found in 1944 by Hans Asperger's. And what these individuals need are visuals and structure and kind of good structure in their lives as far as checklists and to-do lists and literal as a as opposed to kind of vague directions. Um, Cerebral palsy. So this is brain damage affecting movement, posture, spasticity, mobility. Named by Little in 1861. These individuals may need walkers or light gear to help them walk. Some might not need anything to help them walk. Some may need just a cane or just a little bit of maybe like a walker, or maybe that some of them may have to utilize a wheelchair or wheelchair part-time, walker part-time. So it just depends on the level, and there's lots of different levels when it comes to cerebral palsy that you can look into. There's a lot of different types if you're interested in researching that. Same thing with autism. The milder, the moderate, and the severe types of autism are different as well. In the Asperger's, which is formerly called Asperger's, we call just a mild autism spectrum disorder. So Asperger's was these individuals were known for their kind of intellectual, their math and their science abilities, their ability to remember things, and sometimes had some cognitive abilities that were that they wanted to actually study. So cerebral palsy, 1861, Down syndrome, trisomy 21 causing intellectual disability, low muscle tone. Um, and these individuals will need simple tasks. This is genetic based disability. You might see narrow set eyes. You may see tongue protruding from the mouth at an early age, teeth, heart conditions, congenital heart disorders, early operations on the heart operations throughout their entire lives. They're going to have to have a modified diet to make sure that they don't get too, overweight or insulin insensitive, so they don't become diabetic. So it's really important for them to have nutrition and exercise programs. Same thing for all people, including cerebral palsy and autism. Spinal injuries, spinal cord damage causing motor sensory paraplegia, quadriplegia, different types of losses. These individuals may need wheelchairs most likely and will probably qualify for adapted physical education throughout their childhood and throughout their public school. They should probably most likely get physical therapy or some type of therapy or assistance beyond just physical education. They're going to need more specialized adaptive physical educators to create IEP goals for them that are specific to them. Because everyone with a disability is going to have specific individualized goals. That's why they have IEPs or individualized education plans. So it's really important to sit down with a team of people to discuss what are the best goals for functional movement for this specific individual and how do we get there. Sometimes it's going to be via the pool or the water. Sometimes it's going to be via a weight room. Sometimes it's going to be via gyms or a classroom. So you just have to think about those things when you're at your IEP meetings. Auditory impairments. This was noted since the first century. These individuals may need interpreters. Blindness, this has been noted since the first century. They're going to need sound cues. And then you have disease-related disabilities, chronic illnesses like multiple sclerosis, nerve damage. These individuals are going to need easier exercises that don't take on too much weight or load because they can get injured very easily. So people with chronic conditions, maybe it's late stages osteoporosis, where you have low bone mass or sarcopenia, low muscle mass. You're gonna have to think easier and regressive exercise programs. So that's an overview of some of the categories of people with disabilities. Think about the history that it was mixed. So you had periods and times like the Roman era where if you were born with a disability or physical impairment, they may have just left you to pass away, or they have or neglected you, or maybe you got some little care, or maybe you were isolated. But eventually, it became part of the community to recognize individuals with disabilities. And so religious temples would utilize individuals with disabilities and help them kind of with work, and they would help with just mundane or just general tasks around the temple. So they became more well known as, after the year 1200, into the 1300s when beggars were allowed in Paris, blind beggars. So they were, they were looked at as a sin or sometimes a setback. And so they weren't really integrated into society until really war happened in the 1950s and 60s, and people were coming back with a lot of amputations and physical limitations. And so there was a big push for people with physical impairments, and that kind of pushed the edge for all disabilities. And then also civil rights and human rights in the 1960s, 70s Civil Rights Acts kind of helped everything become a little bit more inclusive for people with disabilities, which gave them a little bit more rights and monies toward education, which is leading to what we have now, which are IEPs and adaptive physical activity. So let's go ahead and talk about what adaptive physical activity is. So, adaptive physical activity is a broad term. Adaptive physical activity is a broad term for adaptive sports, or you can call them inclusive sports or unified sports. We can call it inclusive physical education, inclusive physical activity, adaptive physical education. We can call it a lot of different things, Paralympics, Special Olympics. There's a lot of different activities within adaptive physical activity. So think of adaptive physical activity as an umbrella term, which is the name of this course, Adaptive Physical Activity. And so we kind of talk about all aspects, but we kind of primarily talk about the adaptive physical education aspect, how it's utilized in schools, what an adaptive physical education teacher is. And that individual has to typically have a certified adaptive physical education license or specialization certification. Some general PE teachers will be hired as adaptive physical educators if there's not a lot in the county, or if they have a really big passion or a good experience for working with people with disabilities, and they might fit that need at the time at that specific school. So the adaptive physical educator is a person that goes into the schools and will work with specific individuals, let's just say 5 to 15 individuals at a school, and either one-on-one or in a group setting, and we'll have specific individualized goals for that one person. And now who creates these goals? Well, that's going to be the job of the physical educator or the adaptive physical educator who's responsible for those goals. Also, they're going to have to perform an assessment to see do they qualify for adaptive PE. Some individuals may just qualify based on their disability, such as a spinal or a cerebral palsy, may just qualify in general for that. But some individuals with Down syndrome, autism, or intellectual disability, they might not need an adaptive physical educator because they might not have any behavioral or physical limitations or social restrictions that don't allow them to participate in general PE. So there's different levels. You might have the top level, which is they don't need any assistance. They don't need an adaptive PE teacher. They don't need a peer buddy. They can just go to general PE. That's like tier one, right? Tier two is having a peer buddy in the class. Tier three is the teacher is creating some type of structure or visual aid. Tier four is going to be a teacher assistant comes in and works with an individual. Tier five is going to be maybe a teacher assistant plus some type of plan created by the general PE teacher and the IEP staff. And then you might have tier six that's where we're getting into, all right, now you're going to qualify for adaptive PE. Maybe there's a behavioral restriction that doesn't allow you to um, feel safe in the environment. So this is what we call least restrictive environment. So if the individual doesn't like bright lights, loud sounds, they're not going to do well in general PE. So they may qualify for adaptive physical education because that's going to be the best scenario for them to learn general PE. So they would qualify. If the individual needs a water service or some type of pool service, aquatics, because let's just say they do better in the water, then that's something that they have to work within the community. Maybe there's a pool at the school. Maybe the general PE teacher can help coordinate that on top of what they currently do. Sometimes the YMCA, YWCA is a good option for swimming. So that's a little bit of background about adaptive physical activity and the laws or the history. Now we're going to get into the laws. So we have Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act was created in 1973. This prohibits discrimination. Federally funded programs ensures equal education access via 504 plans for impairments such as ADHD or multiple sclerosis. Um, it provides PE accommodations like breaks, modified activities, supports therapy access, therapy, occupational therapy, and other needs. Some people will have a Section 504 plan, but they might not have an IEP. So some people will qualify for both. Some people will just have a Section 504. So if you have a disability, you may qualify for Section 504, but you might not qualify for adapted PE or IEP services because maybe it's a mild version of a disability. But you will qualify with Section 504 based on the diagnosis. In 1975, the IDEA Act, which was reauthorized in 1990 and 2004, this is what ensures free and appropriate public education, or FAPE, for 13 disabilities such as autism, cerebral palsy, visual impairments, orthopedic impairments, auditory impairments, intellectual disability, etc. Included PE and related services like physical therapy, occupational therapy, and nurse assistance. APE application, so it mandates APE if general PE is unsuitable, sets IEP goals, navigate obstacle course with a walker, prioritizes LRE, like we talked about, least restrictive environment. ADA, 1990, amended in 2008, prohibits discrimination in public or private sectors, ensures accessibility facilities for all disabilities. So think about ramps, adaptive equipment, supports inclusive therapy environments. Some schools are grandfathered into not having ADA accessive buildings or classrooms, or let's just say maybe it's like an office. So if the building was built in 1970, you might not have ADA accessible ramps or services for people that utilize wheelchairs. But now, after the 1990 and 2008, ADA makes it mandatory to make sure that you have those ramps and have those services for all different disabilities, so that in private and public sectors. So that's the difference between Section 504, IDEA, and ADA. IDEA is basically the free and appropriate public education that's going to be setting the IEP goals. Section 504 discriminates any federally funded program, so equal education access 504 plans. Um, and then you have ADA, which is going to provide the actual equipment. Special education IEPs, LRE, and assessments. So special education, IDA mandates free and appropriate physical education via IEPs and 504 plans. So when you think about an IEP, it's a legally binding plan which measure with measurable goals, such as kick a ball 5 feet, for instance. Is developed by teams, teachers, parents, and specialists. Now, obviously, I'm going to have more goals like, increasing strength or increasing cardiovascular, respiratory endurance, that type of thing. And I would have specific assessments and goals for that individual. When it comes to specific assessments we use Brockport Fitness Assessment. So Brockport school I went to in undergrad, they have Brockport fitness tests for individuals with intellectual and physical disabilities. It measures fitness like strength, endurance for all different types of disabilities. There's the TGMD. This assesses motor skills, such as locomotor, skipping, hopping, jumping, and then object control skills like running, like dribbling a ball, kicking a ball, and batting. You have the Adaptive Physical Education Assessment Scale, evaluates PE participation for blindness, hearing loss, and qualifies for adaptive PE. So individuals with blindness or hearing losses, that would be a good one for those individual specific categories. The Peabody Developmental Motor Scale tests motor skills in young kids, so any younger kids from birth to 5. So if you're looking for somebody a little bit younger, that's going to be that one. And then the TGMD is also going to be one that's going to be more elementary. The Brockport Fitness Test is going to be more secondary. Yeah, the functional movement assessment observes real-world schools like mobility. So this would be good for someone with cerebral palsy or physical impairments. And then there's a process. So first you get referred, you go through standardized tests, you go through observations, then you have the IEP that decides eligibility if disability limits general PE or daily function. So if the disability limits their daily function, they'll qualify, or if it limits their general PE, then they'll qualify. Okay. So, what programs are there for inclusive and adapted? Are there for these populations? So, you had the Special Olympics, which was developed in 1968. So, people with intellectual disability like Down syndrome, autism, individuals with can participate in swimming and track. You have Paralympics, so people that have physical injuries but not cognitive disability. So that's a main difference between Special Olympics and Paralympics. Paralympics, it's physical disability. Special Olympics, it's intellectual disability. We have things like inclusive PE, inclusive physical education. Inclusive physical education is when you have individuals with and without disabilities playing together or participating in games together. Inclusive physical activity is different than inclusive physical education. Inclusive physical education is when the teacher has designed appropriate lessons for people with and without disabilities. Inclusive physical activity may just be people with and without disabilities playing games together, but it might not be related to specific IEP outcomes or goals for that specific those individuals with disabilities. So it's a little bit less standardized and it's not adapted PE. Then you have unified PE or unified sports, so you have mixed teams, so you have people with and without disabilities on the same team participating together. We had the Unified PE Summit here not too long ago with all the students that participate with and without disabilities together. And we got to see the teams and they participate against each other. And this happens in a lot of different communities now. This is sponsored by the Special Olympics. You have adaptive physical activity. Like we said, this is going to be general terms for just any type of activity involving people with disabilities. And then you have adapted fitness, which are tailored workouts. So maybe chair exercise, workout classes, exercise classes designed for elderly individuals at group at at retirement communities. So adaptive fitness can be any kind of category that requires adaptation of equipment. So it could be designed for people with amputations. Adaptive fitness could be for individuals specifically with specific disabilities. So that's a general term as well. Like again, we have inclusive physical activity, adaptive physical education, adapted fitness, inclusives, and unified sports, unified um, physical activity. So we have a lot of different types of adaptive physical activity and programs. And a lot of it started basically in the last 30 years. So, um, you know, ask yourself, what community programs am I around that I can internship at or find a field placement at or volunteer at that is in a fitness or health field, and that's something that this class will obviously help you with. So it'll be really interesting observing you and your reactions toward working with individuals with disabilities in adaptive physical activity settings. So this is kind of the history of adaptive physical activity, adaptive physical education, and the categories of disabilities that um, are in this specific topic. And then also talking about the laws, the history, and assessments used in adaptive physical activity. So that's going to do it for lecture one. Let me know if you have questions, and I look forward to getting into lecture number two with you. All right, take it easy.